There is a misconception in the modern world that power must be loud, aggressive, or forceful. Many people imagine power as something expressed outwardly, through dominance, through intensity, through the ability to shout or outmaneuver others. But this version of power is unstable, it is reactive, it demands external confirmation, and because of that, it can be taken away the moment circumstances change. True power is not found in force, true power is found in stillness. It rises from a steady center that does not waver based on the noise of the outside world. Inner stillness is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. It is the art of remaining anchored while the storms of life move around you. It is the quiet confidence that does not need to prove itself because it already knows its own depth. When a person, especially a woman, connects to this stillness, she accesses a form of strength that is unshakable. Others may appear stronger on the surface, but their strength is dependent on resistance and effort. Her strength, by contrast, comes from alignment. It is like the strength of a mountain, a moving not because it insists on stillness, but because stillness is its nature. Stillness gives rise to clarity. When you are not constantly reacting to the world, you begin to see it more clearly. You begin to feel the intention behind words, the energy beneath actions, the truth behind appearances. This clarity is a form of power because it allows you to navigate life with precision instead of confusion. People who operate from force frequently act on impulse, and impulse often leads to mistakes. But a person grounded in stillness responds rather than reacts. They choose their words. They move with intention. They act from a stable inner space rather than the chaos of the moment. Emotional storms cannot knock over someone who has cultivated stillness. Disrespect cannot provoke them. Manipulation does not influence them. Temporary emotions do not dictate their long-term decisions. This stability is one of the most profound expressions of power because it means that the external world no longer controls the internal world. It is easy to be peaceful when life is peaceful, but inner stillness is the capacity to remain centered even when life becomes turbulent. This is the kind of strength that cannot be taken away because it does not depend on anything outside the self. Stillness is deeply misunderstood because it appears passive on the surface. In reality, it is one of the most active forms of self-mastery. It requires discipline to observe instead of react, to breathe before speaking, to listen instead of assuming. It requires the courage to sit with discomfort rather than escaping it, avoiding it, or projecting it onto others. Many people choose force because it is easier. It requires less inner work. It is a shortcut to feeling powerful without actually becoming powerful. Stillness demands growth. It insists that you face your own fears, insecurities, and wounds, and it is through this process that your presence begins to transform. People can feel the difference between force and true strength. Force demands compliance. True strength invites respect. Force seeks attention. True strength attracts attention without trying. Force attempts to control others. True strength controls itself. When a woman stands in her inner stillness, she becomes a kind of quiet magnet. Nothing in her energy is chaotic. Nothing is grasping. Nothing is desperate. This is why people find themselves drawn to her without knowing why. They feel safe in her presence. They feel grounded by her steadiness. Her calmness creates a space where others can feel their own inner noise more clearly, and this awareness functions like a mirror. Stillness creates an aura of certainty. Not because you know everything, but because you trust yourself enough to move slowly, deliberately, without panic. A person who moves from stillness does not need to rush. They do not need to force outcomes. They understand that clarity emerges when the mind is quiet and the heart is centered. This certainty translates into influence. Others listen when you speak because you do not speak from fear. You speak from alignment. Others follow your lead because your decisions are not impulsive. They come from depth. The world today is filled with noise, digital noise, emotional noise, social noise. People are constantly overwhelmed, overstimulated, unsure. In such an environment, the one who remains still becomes powerful not by effort, but by contrast. Stillness becomes a beacon. It becomes a form of authority. It becomes the quality that distinguishes true strength from performative strength. You don't have to push. You don't have to demand. Your presence alone changes the dynamic around you. This is why inner stillness has been revered across cultures, philosophies, and spiritual traditions for centuries. It is the foundation upon which all meaningful power rests. When you cultivate inner stillness, you begin to understand that strength is not the ability to overpower others, but the ability to remain unmoved by chaos. It is not the ability to control every outcome, but the ability to stay centered regardless of the outcome. It is not the ability to avoid challenges, but the ability to face them without losing yourself. And within this stillness, a new kind of confidence emerges, one that does not rise and fall with circumstances, one that is not affected by external validation, one that does not break when pressure appears. It is the confidence of someone who knows that their true power does not come from force, but from the quiet, steady space within themselves. Sensitivity is often misunderstood, mislabeled, or dismissed as weakness in a world that glorifies hardness and emotional suppression. Yet sensitivity, especially within a woman, is one of the most profound forms of intelligence. It is an intelligence that does not conform to linear logic. It does not operate through calculations or rigid frameworks. Instead, it moves through intuition, perception, emotional awareness, and the subtle reading of human behavior. It is a form of intelligence that sees beneath the surface and hears what is not being said. A woman who is sensitive can detect shifts in energy long before anything is spoken aloud. She can feel the tension in a room even when everyone is pretending to be fine. She can sense when someone's words do not match their intention, when affection is hiding insecurity, or when distance is masking fear. This is not imagination. It is perception refined through emotional depth. Sensitivity allows her to observe patterns in the behavior of others that they themselves may be unaware of. It enables her to understand motives, wounds, and desires not because she has been told, but because she feels them. This form of intelligence comes from a heightened awareness of emotion, both her own and the emotions of others. Instead of drowning in what she feels, she learns to navigate it the way someone might navigate water, with presence, with attention, with acknowledgement. When sensitivity is not rejected or shamed, it becomes a map. It teaches her about her own inner world, revealing truths she cannot access through logic alone. It alerts her when something is misaligned, when something is harmful, when something is worth trusting. Her emotions form a kind of internal compass, pointing her toward what is genuine and away from what is energetically false. A sensitive woman often sees the truth before others do. She senses emotional distance in a partner long before the relationship begins to drift outwardly. She notices subtle changes in tone, body language, rhythm, things small enough to escape the awareness of those who are disconnected from emotional nuance. And because she sees early, she feels early. This early awareness is not a burden, it is intelligence. It gives her the ability to act before patterns become destructive, to heal before wounds deepen, to let go before illusion becomes attachment. Sensitivity also allows her to build deeper relationships because she listens not only with her ears, but with her presence. She hears the pain beneath someone's silence. She notices the hesitation behind someone's smile. She understands the difference between someone needing space and someone withdrawing out of emotional confusion. This awareness creates connections rooted in understanding rather than assumption. People often feel safe opening up to her because she does not dismiss or belittle emotion. Her sensitivity becomes a bridge that allows others to express themselves honestly. However, sensitivity becomes true intelligence only when paired with emotional discipline. Without discipline, sensitivity may become overwhelming, leaving her vulnerable to absorbing the emotions and expectations of others. But when she learns to observe rather than internalize, sensitivity transforms into wisdom. She becomes someone who can feel deeply without losing herself in the feelings. She becomes someone who can understand others without becoming responsible for their emotional storms. This ability to sense without absorbing is one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence. Sensitivity gives her insight into human behavior, but it also grants her insight into herself. A sensitive woman can detect when her boundaries are being crossed long before the crossing becomes obvious. She can feel when a relationship, environment, or situation is draining her energy. She can sense when something is nourishing her spirit and when something is restricting it. This internal awareness protects her. It guides her toward choices aligned with her well-being. It helps her build a life grounded in truth rather than pretense. In a world that teaches people to numb themselves, a sensitive woman remains alive. She is aware of beauty in small places, aware of meaning in small gestures, aware of connection in the slightest moment of understanding. Her sensitivity enables her to experience life vividly. She feels joy intensely, creativity naturally, connection deeply. This richness of inner experience gives her access to layers of life that many people never touch because they have shut themselves off from feeling. There is also intuition, the silent knowing that sensitivity strengthens. Intuition is not magic, it is intelligence processed in a different way. It is the mind gathering subtle information that logic cannot categorize. It is the body sensing what the eyes cannot see. It is the heart recognizing truth without needing proof. A sensitive woman's intuition becomes one of her greatest tools because it helps her make decisions that align with her emotional truth, even when logic is unclear. When sensitivity is embraced rather than suppressed, it becomes a profound asset. It allows her to move through the world with awareness, connection, authenticity, and emotional clarity. It gives her the ability to understand people on a deeper level, to protect her energy, to recognize the truth beneath appearances, and to cultivate relationships that honor her depth. It enables her to lead not through force, but through presence, empathy, and grounded perception. Sensitivity, in its highest form, is not a liability. It is the intelligence of the heart, the intuition of the spirit, and the awareness of the emotional world that lies beneath every action, every word, and every silent. Emotional discipline is often misunderstood as repression or denial, but it is neither. It is the art of mastering one's inner landscape so that reactions do not dictate behavior and impulses do not overshadow intention. For a woman, emotional discipline is not merely a tool for self-control, it is the foundation of her presence, the invisible architecture that shapes how others perceive her and how she navigates the world. Presence is not a performance, it is a natural outcome of alignment. When her emotions are observed, understood, and consciously directed, she radiates a calm authority that cannot be fabricated or forced. Without emotional discipline, a woman's presence is inconsistent, subject to the shifting tides of her inner state. She may be bright and magnetic one moment, distant and agitated the next. This unpredictability creates tension in her relationships and diminishes the power of her influence. Emotional discipline, however, brings steadiness. It allows her to act from a place of clarity rather than confusion. Her decisions are guided by awareness rather than reaction, and her words carry weight because they are chosen rather than reflexive. Discipline transforms emotion from a chaotic force into a tool for intentional engagement with the world. Discipline does not mean ignoring what she feels, it means acknowledging emotion without being consumed by it. When a wave of anger, frustration, or sadness arises, she observes it like a passerby rather than a hostage. She recognizes the message behind the emotion, what it signals about her needs, boundaries, or values, and responds in a way that honors both herself and the situation. By not allowing emotion to hijack her actions, she preserves the integrity of her presence. People respond not only to her words but to the energy she carries, and emotional discipline ensures that this energy remains composed, centered, and deliberate. Her presence, shaped by emotional discipline, has a magnetic quality. Others sense that she is anchored. They feel the stability in her energy. She does not need to assert herself through volume, gestures, or dominance because her alignment communicates more than any act could. The calmness she exudes commands attention and respect effortlessly. Emotional discipline allows her to navigate conflict without panic or defensiveness. She can hold space for tension without becoming overwhelmed. In doing so, she not only preserves her own inner balance, but also guides the emotional tone of the room, subtly influencing how others respond to her and to one another. Discipline in the emotional realm also cultivates discernment. She learns to distinguish between impulses that serve her growth and reactions that stem from fear, ego, or conditioning. She does not suppress emotion to fit expectations. Rather, she refines her emotional responses so that they reflect wisdom and intentionality. This discernment allows her to engage with others authentically while remaining unshaken by manipulation or drama. Her presence becomes a stabilizing force because she is no longer buffeted by every emotional disturbance around her. She chooses which energies to absorb, which to acknowledge, and which to let pass without attachment. A woman with emotional discipline also demonstrates the power of consistency. People feel secure in her presence because she is reliable, not because she conforms or appeases, But because she has mastered herself, she does not overreact to praise or criticism. She does not allow excitement or disappointment to cloud her judgment. Her emotions inform her, but they do not control her. This consistency, cultivated over time, builds trust and influence. Her presence communicates maturity, resilience, and inner strength, qualities that draw others toward her naturally rather than through effort or coercion. The development of emotional discipline requires patience and self-reflection. It is not an achievement that comes overnight. It demands observing patterns of thought and behavior, understanding triggers, and practicing restraint in the moment. Meditation, self-inquiry, journaling, and mindful breath are tools that aid this cultivation. Through these practices, she learns that every emotion has a purpose and that the mastery of it amplifies her clarity. She discovers that the more she observes without reacting, the more her emotional intelligence deepens and the more her presence becomes palpable, not only to those around her, but to herself. Emotional discipline shapes not only how others perceive her, but also how she perceives the world. With clarity and composure, she navigates complex interpersonal dynamics, professional challenges, and personal growth with grace. She can hold duality, feeling deeply while remaining grounded, expressing vulnerability without losing authority, offering compassion without compromising her boundaries. Her presence is no longer reactive, it is reflective, deliberate, and aligned with her core values. People feel this alignment even before they hear her words. They sense it in her gaze, her posture, her calmness, her deliberate gestures. The cultivation of emotional discipline does not lead to rigidity, it leads to freedom. By mastering her responses, she liberates herself from the tyranny of impulsive reactions and external expectations. She experiences a profound sense of autonomy, knowing that her inner state is self-determined and that she is not a captive of circumstance or the emotional projections of others. This freedom enhances her presence because it allows her to be fully herself in any environment. She does not need to perform or adapt for approval. Her authority comes from the depth of her emotional integrity and the poise cultivated through discipline. Through emotional discipline, she also becomes a teacher without speaking. Her presence educates others on the value of self-mastery, calm observation, and intentional living. People learn by watching her navigate challenges gracefully, respond with wisdom, and remain anchored amidst chaos. Her presence becomes a template for emotional composure, inspiring those around her to cultivate their own awareness and self-regulation. In this way, discipline is not a constraint but a source of influence that radiates quietly, powerfully, and persistently. Authenticity is often spoken about as though it is simple. Be yourself, people say. Yet authenticity is rarely simple. It requires courage, self-awareness, and the willingness to face one's own contradictions without hiding behind masks or social expectations. For a woman, authenticity is more than honesty. It is a force that shapes her presence, energy, and influence in ways that cannot be achieved through imitation, conformity, or performance. When she aligns her inner truth with her outward expression, she radiates a magnetic force that draws people to her naturally, without effort or manipulation. Authenticity begins with self-knowledge. To be authentic, a woman must first understand who she is beyond the layers of conditioning, societal norms, or other people's expectations. She must confront the aspects of herself she has been taught to hide: her desires, fears, contradictions, and truths. This self-knowledge is not static. It is a continual process of observation, reflection, and refinement. As she becomes more intimately familiar with her inner landscape, she can live and act in alignment with it. There is a clarity and integrity in her energy that others unconsciously recognize, a subtle resonance that feels genuine because it is grounded in reality rather than projection. Magnetic influence emerges when authenticity is expressed consistently. People are drawn to those who are real, who speak and act in harmony with their values and emotions. Authenticity does not seek attention, yet it is impossible to ignore because it carries the weight of truth. When a woman acts from her authentic self, she is not performing to impress or manipulating to achieve an outcome. Instead, she is fully present, fully aware, and fully herself. This presence has a quiet authority that others naturally respect, and it communicates trustworthiness, strength, and alignment without the need for words or effort. The power of authenticity lies in its contrast to the inauthenticity that dominates human interactions. Most people navigate the world wearing masks, projecting confidence when they feel doubt, speaking politeness while harboring resentment, following expectations instead of inner guidance. In such an environment, authenticity shines because it is rare. A woman who does not mask her emotions or distort her truth becomes a focal point, a lighthouse amid the fog. Others are drawn to her because she embodies a freedom they desire but have not yet cultivated, the courage to express themselves without apology. Authenticity also cultivates deep connections. When she presents herself honestly, she encourages others to do the same. People sense that she does not judge or manipulate, and therefore they feel safe to reveal themselves without pretense. Relationships formed through authenticity are not superficial, they are rooted in understanding, trust, and resonance. The magnetic influence of authenticity is relational as much as it is personal. It allows her to impact others on a profound level because her energy is truthful, her intentions clear, and her presence unwavering. Furthermore, authenticity empowers decision-making. When a woman is true to herself, she no longer makes choices out of fear, obligation, or the desire to please. Her decisions are guided by inner alignment, by a deep understanding of what feels right and what serves her growth. This decisiveness, rooted in truth rather than social expectation, adds to her magnetic presence. People are drawn to those who know themselves and act accordingly. Her authenticity communicates clarity, and clarity creates influence because it signals reliability, consistency, and integrity. Living authentically requires courage because it often challenges external pressures and societal norms. It may provoke misunderstanding, criticism, or resistance. But a woman grounded in authenticity recognizes that the approval of others is not the measure of her value. She learns to differentiate between constructive feedback and attempts to shape her into someone she is not. In doing so, she strengthens her influence because it is no longer contingent upon external validation. Her energy is self-sustained, her presence is self-anchored, and her influence is organic, arising naturally from the alignment between her inner truth and outward expression. Authenticity is also expressed through vulnerability. It is not about weakness, but transparency, the courage to show herself fully, her emotions, her imperfections, her humanity. Vulnerability is magnetic because it creates relatability and trust. When a woman allows herself to be seen without masks, she demonstrates that strength does not require perfection. She shows that truth and courage can coexist with humility and imperfection. People are drawn to this embodiment because it is rare and genuine. It inspires others to embrace their own authenticity. The magnetic influence of authenticity extends beyond interpersonal interactions. It shapes the way she engages with the world. She does not conform to expectations that feel false. She does not chase trends for superficial approval, and she does not manipulate perception for personal gain. Instead, she moves with integrity, makes choices aligned with her values, and expresses her ideas with honesty and clarity. This alignment between thought, feeling, and action radiates as a cohesive energy that others sense intuitively, creating an unspoken attraction and respect that cannot be artificially manufactured. Finally, authenticity is a continuous journey rather than a fixed state. It requires ongoing reflection, courage, and awareness. Each moment presents an opportunity to realign, to shed masks, to confront fear, and to express truth. As a woman deepens her authenticity, her presence becomes more compelling, more luminous, and more influential. Her influence is magnetic not because she seeks it, but because it arises naturally from her alignment, her integrity, and her unwavering commitment to being herself in every circumstance, in every interaction, and in every choice. Boundaries are often misunderstood in society as walls meant to push people away or as barriers that limit connection. Yet boundaries are not walls. They are the structural framework of emotional integrity, clarity, and influence. For a woman, boundaries are not just rules or limitations. They are the architecture of her power. They define the space she occupies, protect her energy, and communicate to others how she chooses to be treated. They are both invisible and visible, subtle yet undeniable, forming the foundation upon which her strength and presence are built. A woman who understands boundaries knows that her energy is finite and that where she invests it matters. Boundaries allow her to preserve her emotional, mental, and physical resources. They prevent depletion by creating clear distinctions between what belongs to her and what belongs to others. Without boundaries, energy leaks, relationships become entangled with confusion, and her influence diminishes. With boundaries, however, she operates from clarity and self-respect, projecting an energy that others cannot ignore. Boundaries become a statement of self-worth. They silently assert that she values herself and expects the same from others. The establishment of boundaries is not a defensive act, it is an act of self-definition. It communicates to the world where she begins and ends, where she is willing to give and where she is unwilling to compromise. This clarity is powerful because it allows her to interact with others without ambiguity. People are drawn to the certainty of her energy because it reduces confusion and sets a tone of respect and accountability. Boundaries define the parameters of engagement, teaching others how to show up and how to behave around her without needing confrontation or constant correction. Boundaries are also essential in shaping her emotional environment. By knowing what she will tolerate and what she will not, she creates space that nurtures her growth and protects her from unnecessary stress or manipulation. Emotional discipline and boundaries work hand in hand. When she combines the awareness of her emotions with the firmness of her boundaries, her presence becomes anchored, resilient, and grounded. She is neither passive nor aggressive. She is assertive in a way that is calm yet unmistakable. Her power arises not from force, but from the integrity of her choices and the clarity of her limits. Boundaries foster autonomy and independence. They allow her to make decisions without being swayed by external pressures or the expectations of others. When a woman maintains her boundaries, she preserves her ability to act intentionally rather than reactively. She does not sacrifice her values, time, or energy for approval, validation, or avoidance of conflict. In doing so, she models a form of self-respect that others recognize and often emulate. Her influence grows because it is rooted in self-mastery, not in seeking control over others. People respond to the strength of her energy because it is anchored in authenticity and integrity. Establishing boundaries requires courage because it often challenges relationships, societal norms, and internalized beliefs. A woman must face the fear of disapproval, rejection, or misunderstanding. Yet boundaries are not about alienation, they are about alignment. They ensure that the relationships and connections she engages in are mutually respectful and supportive. Over time, boundaries cultivate discernment. She learns who honors her energy, who aligns with her values, and who drains or diminishes her presence. Through this discernment, she builds a network of interactions that are nourishing, not depleting, further amplifying her influence and capacity for impact. Boundaries also communicate consistency. When she maintains clear limits, others learn what is acceptable and what is not. This consistency fosters trust because people know what to expect from her energy and presence. In professional, personal, and social interactions, her boundaries create predictability, which is not dull or rigid but stabilizing. People are drawn to the stability of her energy, which stems from her unwavering sense of self. Her power is evident in the way she navigates challenges, asserts her needs, and remains grounded amidst shifting circumstances. Boundaries allow her to say no without guilt and yes without compromise. They are a form of emotional architecture that ensures her energy is invested where it is valued and respected. When she refuses to tolerate disrespect, emotional manipulation, or energy depletion, she does not act from fear or defensiveness. She acts from clarity and self-alignment. Each boundary she sets reinforces the structure of her power, creating a framework that supports her growth, her presence, and her influence. People may initially resist, but over time, they recognize the wisdom, steadiness, and authority embedded in her energy. Boundaries also enable the full expression of her authenticity. Without clear limits, her identity and intentions can become diluted or misrepresented. Boundaries protect her from being shaped by the expectations, fears, or agendas of others. They provide a space in which her authentic self can emerge fully without compromise or distortion. The architecture of her power is thus intertwined with her integrity, her discernment, and her ability to honor herself consistently. Her presence becomes magnetic because it is coherent, self-aligned, and unapologetically firm. Through the consistent practice of establishing and honoring boundaries, a woman develops resilience. She learns to navigate emotional complexity, interpersonal pressure, and societal expectation without losing herself. Boundaries allow her to maintain equilibrium even in turbulent environments. They provide structure for her energy, stability for her intentions, and clarity for her interactions. By cultivating these limits, she builds an invisible architecture of power that guides her presence, shapes her relationships, and ensures that her influence is grounded in respect, integrity, and unwavering self-awareness. Compassion is often celebrated as one of the most beautiful human qualities, yet it is frequently misunderstood. In many cultural narratives, compassion is presented as self-sacrificing, as if true kindness demands the surrender of one's own needs, energy, or boundaries. But for a woman who has cultivated emotional intelligence and inner alignment, compassion is not about self-abandonment. It is a deliberate and conscious engagement with the suffering, challenges, and needs of others while maintaining connection to her own center. It is both a shield and a bridge, a power that allows her to give generously without being depleted or diminished. True compassion begins with self-awareness. Before she can extend empathy to another, she must first understand her own emotions, desires, and limitations. She must recognize where her energy naturally flows, where her boundaries lie, and what she requires to remain grounded. Without this awareness, compassion becomes reactive and unsustainable. When a woman understands herself deeply, she is able to distinguish between healthy empathy and emotional overextension. She does not confuse her responsibility for another's well-being with her own obligation to maintain her energy and clarity. Compassion, when rooted in self-awareness, becomes a conscious act of presence rather than an unconscious sacrifice. Self-abandonment often masquerades as love, care, or dedication. It convinces a woman that she must compromise her needs, tolerate disrespect, or ignore her intuition in order to nurture others. Yet this type of giving is ultimately disempowering. It breeds resentment, exhaustion, and confusion. Compassion without self-abandonment, in contrast, arises from alignment. She gives not because she is compelled or coerced by guilt or fear, but because she chooses to act from a place of integrity. This form of compassion is regenerative. It allows her to nurture others while maintaining her own vitality, energy, and clarity. Boundaries are essential to this practice. She understands that compassion does not mean saying yes to every demand, absorbing every emotional disturbance, or ignoring her own limits. Boundaries allow her to choose where and how to invest her energy. They protect her from manipulation and emotional drainage while creating space for genuine connection. When she communicates her boundaries calmly and firmly, she models healthy relational dynamics and sets the tone for interactions that honor both her needs and those of others. Compassion is most powerful when it is deliberate, and deliberate compassion requires the architecture of limits. A woman's strength is amplified when she practices compassion without self-abandonment because it cultivates trust and presence. People sense the difference between a giver who is resentful, tired, or conflicted and one who gives from alignment, choice, and centeredness. Her energy becomes magnetic because it is coherent, deliberate, and balanced. She does not bend to please, manipulate, or control. She engages with authenticity, presence, and intention. Her compassion is contagious not because it is forced or performative, but because it reflects the integrity of her inner world. Others instinctively recognize and respect this energy. Compassion without self-abandonment also requires discernment. She is able to read situations, understand intentions, and respond appropriately without being consumed by the emotional weight of others. She distinguishes between when her engagement will be healing and constructive and when it may enable dependency, toxicity, or harm. Her empathy is not indiscriminate, it is precise, guided by wisdom and clarity. This discernment ensures that her compassion nurtures growth rather than chaos, and that her influence strengthens rather than diminishes her presence. In addition, this form of compassion requires the courage to hold space for discomfort. She does not avoid or deny the suffering of others, nor does she allow their pain to dictate her emotional state. She can witness grief, frustration, anger, or fear without losing her grounding. Her strength lies in her capacity to remain present while observing without absorbing, to act without overextending, and to respond without over-identifying. She does not minimize her own worth or compromise her inner alignment to make others comfortable. Her compassion is anchored in both heart and center, creating a balance that radiates quiet authority and genuine care. Practicing compassion without self-abandonment is an ongoing process of reflection and self-regulation. It demands awareness of internal triggers, emotional patterns, and areas where past conditioning might tempt her to give beyond what is healthy. Through meditation, journaling, and conscious observation, she owns the skill of responding with empathy while maintaining self-respect. She recognizes that the depth of her influence is measured not by how much she sacrifices, but by how fully she engages without losing herself. Her compassion becomes a sustainable force because it flows from strength rather than obligation. This strength also manifests in relationships. When she interacts with others, whether family, friends, colleagues, or partners, she demonstrates that care and presence do not require self-erasure. She can love deeply, nurture attentively, and guide gently while maintaining her boundaries and integrity. Her influence grows because people sense that her generosity is authentic, not coerced, that her empathy is grounded, not reactive, and that her presence is calm, stable, and deliberate. She becomes a stabilizing force, an example of strength married to sensitivity, authority married to humility, and compassion married to self-respect. Through this integration, compassion without self-abandonment becomes her highest strength. It allows her to engage fully with the world, respond meaningfully to the needs of others, and navigate complex emotional landscapes with grace. She is able to sustain her energy, preserve her clarity, and amplify her influence without sacrificing the essence of who she is. The power of her presence lies not in domination or control, but in the coherence between her inner alignment and her outward action, in the balance between giving and preserving, in the wisdom to act from heart without surrendering herself,